Alright, everyone. So in this video, I want to implement the mechanics of how each clone, when it gets to 9 and it changes to 0, how does it pass the turn to its neighbor? So that's what I want to cover now. So go to the take turn block that we recently created. And then in this block, I want to split out the costume stuff with from the other stuff. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move next costume to here. And then I'm not going to worry about this switch costume to 0, because what happens is Scratch automatically, if it runs out of costumes and you tell it next costume, it will just go to the first one. So we don't have to have a separate thing for that. So next costume will handle it for everybody. So we can get rid of this. And what we can do is we can say, if the costume number equals 1, then create clone of myself. So where the old one said, if costume number equals 10, which means that you're on a 9, then create clone of myself and change to 0, because we're putting this first, what we really need to do is we need to say, if you've already changed to 0, which is costume number 1, then also do this with it. Okay, so if the costume number has reached the end, if it has got to 9 and changed to 0, then do some stuff. This isn't quite right yet, but we'll fix it in a minute. Otherwise, there's nothing to do. So if you just moved from a 2 to a 3, from a 3 to a 4, from a 4 to a 5, any of the normal changes, except for the 1 at the end, that's 9 to 0. For anything else, just end the turn. Well, what do we mean by end the turn? Well, we just mean set the turn to nobody's turn. So set whose turn to 0, and that allows all the numbers, all the sprite numbers, all the clones that are waiting to just trip this part here and move past this so they can stop waiting, and everybody just ends their turn. Now actually what we want here is not create clone of myself, it's something a little bit more complicated. Create clone worked when we just started off because we were only using small numbers. And when 9 becomes 10, then that's exactly what has to happen. It has to change to 0, and then it has to create a clone of itself that starts at 1. But what about when 19 becomes 20? Well, again, 9 becomes 0, but there's no need to create a clone of itself because there's something already there. We just need to change that to 2. So you don't always need a new clone. You only need a new clone when you need to add a new 1 to the front of what you already have. So what we really need here is something like a new block. Tell neighbor to take a turn. So we put that there. And then the create clone is going to be under this in the right spot. So if then else, and this is going to say, if there's no clone already, then create a clone. Otherwise, tell the clone that's already there to increase by 1. So if highest column equals my ID, then that means that if I'm the highest column, meaning there's nothing to my left, well then that means that I need a new clone to pass the turn to. And if we just put up here that the clone starts off in the right costume, in other words it appears as the number 1, then there's nothing more to be done here, so we can just end the turn by set whose turn to 0. So it's nobody's turn, and now all those clones that were waiting to take a turn, they can just stop waiting, because they can pass this point now and stop waiting. Otherwise, if I already have a neighbor, so if I'm not the highest column, then I have a neighbor already to the left, well then I just tell it to increment by 1. So I basically just give it a turn. So how do I give it a turn? I just set the turn to 10 times the current turn. Well, the current turn is mine. So by setting it to 10 times whose turn, I'm setting it to 10 times my ID, which is going to be the next column over because they're all 10 times the next. As soon as whose turn changes to the ID of the next number over, well, in its own code, that sprite will have been waiting here, waiting for whose turn to equal my ID. Well, whose turn has just been set to my ID. So now it will go ahead and it will enact this stuff and it will take its turn. So that's the main function done. It's not quite ready to test yet, but we'll get to that in the next video, and I'll see you there. Thank you for listening, and if you find this video useful, please hit like and subscribe.